An elliptic curve signature, the kind sitting in firmware and secure elements all over your estate, is 64 bytes. The one that replaces it is 3,309. That's roughly 50 times bigger for the exact same job, and it's going into slots that were sized for the small one and hard-coded a decade ago. So somewhere in your estate is a well-run, fully patched system that will never accept post-quantum cryptography, because the field where the signature goes is a fixed size and the new signature doesn't fit in it. The signature that doesn't fit is ml-dsa, the post-quantum replacement for every signature you run. Key establishment goes to ml-kem, and there's a second algorithm behind each of them built on completely different mathematics for the places where the defaults break down. Knowing the names is the easy part. By the end of this video, you'll know why bigger keys can't save you, why there are deliberately two algorithms for each job, and what breaks in your estate the moment you deploy them. I'm Addie Lamar, founder and principal advisor of Lamar Labs, with 15 years inside the cryptography the entire digital world trusts. This channel puts you in command of the quantum transition so you can lead it while the rest of your industry is still guessing. When an algorithm turns out to be weak, the instinct is to make the key bigger. That instinct has worked for decades. And it's the first thing to unlearn because here it does nothing. Your cryptography splits into two halves, and they behave completely differently under quantum attack. Symmetric encryption, which protects your data at rest, gets modestly weaker, and you generally do fix that by moving to a bigger key. Move to AES 256 and you're done. That half survives. Public key cryptography works differently. RSA is secure because factoring huge numbers is super hard, and elliptic curve because a related problem is hard. A quantum computer running Shor's algorithm solves both of those problems efficiently, so the hardness they depend on is gone. A bigger RSA key gives a quantum attacker slightly more work and still leaves the problem solvable. NIST's own guidance is blunt about it. Increasing the key size doesn't fix the problem because the underlying assumption is what fails. That's why this is a replacement rather than an upgrade. So what are you replacing it with? NIST published the first 3 post-quantum standards in 2024, and they split along the 2 jobs your public key cryptography actually does. The first job is key establishment, which is how 2 systems that have never met agree on a shared secret. That's the job RSA key transport and elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman do in every TLS handshake that you run. The replacement is ml-kem, standardized as FIPS 203. It's built on lattice mathematics, and it's the default you'll deploy. By the way, I coded a bunch of explainer renders to illustrate how ml-kem works under the hood if you're curious about it. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. The second job is signatures, which is how a system proves an artifact is genuine. That's certificates, code signing, firmware, tokens, and audit trails. The replacement there is ml-dsa, standardized as FIPS 204 and finalized in August of 2024. It's lattice-based too, and it's the other default you'll deploy. And the standards bodies took one more precaution. There's a second algorithm for each job deliberately built on completely different mathematics. SLH-DSA, standardized as FIPS 205, is a hash-based signature scheme rather than a lattice one, and it's the conservative backup. HQC is a code-based keying mechanism selected after those first 3 were already final, and NIST described it explicitly as the backup to ml-kem. There's also FIPS 206 for constrained devices, still in draft. The reason is that nobody wants the entire future of encryption depending on one branch of mathematics. Lattice cryptography is well studied and it's the right default. And if a serious weakness ever turned up in lattices, a portfolio with no non-lattice option would leave you with nothing to switch to. So what does this cost you? Post-quantum cryptography has one operational problem, and it's size. The public key your systems use for key exchange today on curve 25519 is 32 bytes. The ml-kem public key that replaces it is about 1,184, with a ciphertext of roughly 1,088. That is a 37-fold increase. The signature is worse. An ECDSA signature on the P256 curve is 64 bytes. The ml-dsa signature that replaces it at the parameter set that NIST recommends as default is 3,309. Call it 50 times bigger. And SLHDSA, which is the conservative hash-based backup, is heavier still. Signatures and keys live in certificates, which chain to other certificates, and the whole chain travels inside a TLS handshake that has to fit through network paths sized for something far smaller. They also sit inside firmware images with a signature slot some engineers sized a decade ago and hasn't touched since, in embedded devices with fixed memory budgets, and in smart cards, payment terminals, and hardware security models with key stores built to a specification. Every one of those was designed around a signature of 64 bytes. That's why teams keep discovering that post-quantum means genuine re-engineering on a class of systems they were sure would be easy. So which systems in your estate are going to break? The ceiling question turns signature size into a list you can act on, and sending it takes about 2 minutes. Ask your firmware owners and PKI team in these words: what is the maximum signature size our firmware verifier and our certificate chain will accept? The number you want is the maximum, which is a different number from the size they're running today. In most organizations, nobody knows it. It's a hard-coded constant that somebody chose a decade ago, sitting in a header file or a hardware spec that hasn't been opened since. The question sends people looking for a number they've never had to know. And some of those numbers are going to come back well under 3,309 bytes. Every system where that's true physically cannot hold an ml-dsa signature. Those systems need re-engineering or replacement, and they carry the longest lead time in your entire migration. So you walk out with a list of every system in your estate that can accept the new signature. That list is your phase 1 scope, and it's the part money can't compress because you really can't reconfigure your way out of a fixed size field. There's a free field guide breakdown on the ceiling question in the description, with a bunch of extra bonus tips. The next time a migration plan reaches you with no re-engineering line in it, it's how you find out whether the plan is actually real. There are 3 assumptions most leaders make, and each one turns into a surprise in year 2. The first is stopping at how much bigger it is. 50 times sounds like a capacity problem, and capacity problems get solved with money. This one gets solved with engineering time. A 3,309 byte signature is harmless in a system with room to spare and impossible in one whose ceiling is 2,000, and the ratio tells you nothing about which of your systems is which. The number that decides your migration is the ceiling in each system you own, and nobody has written those down. The second is deploying a post-quantum key exchange and declaring the system migrated. Key establishment protects the confidentiality of the conversation and signatures the authenticity of everything you trust. A system with a post-quantum handshake and a classical certificate chain is still forgeable. And the signature side is the harder half because certificate chains and trust stores are everywhere. The third is assuming the defaults are the answer everywhere. ml-kem and ml-dsa are the right default for most of your estate, and they're the wrong answer for the constrained device that can't hold a 3,309 byte signature, and for the long-lived firmware trust anchor where the conservative hash-based option is the better choice. The portfolio exists because the answer is different in different places. You can learn the 2 names in an afternoon, but fitting 3,309 bytes through certificates, handshakes, and firmware slots sized for 64 is the part that takes years. You can send the ceiling question this week and come back with the list of systems in your estate that physically can't hold a 3,309 byte signature. And when you decide that mapping the right algorithm onto every part of your estate is bigger than what your team has room for, that's the work I do at Lamar Labs. The link's below. There's one question that everyone asks the moment they see those names. Do you simply turn ml-kem on? Almost nobody does. Nearly everyone deploys a hybrid first, running the old algorithm and the new one side by side. And it's the right call. Most of them haven't decided when they turn the old algorithm off or who owns doing it. That's how a 2-year migration becomes a decade, and that's the next video. I'll see you there next.